That's carried. Thank you. So now we'll move straight to item 22, organics processing options. So if I could invite staff to the table to speak to this report, please. Let's see how long this takes. What I'm proposing is that we deal with this and then take a break for lunch. I'm mindful of being respectful to people that came and made deputations that want to listen to this item. Yeah, we won't be, I imagine we'll be doing this and then breaking for lunch, and then we'll be back around 2 o'clock or possibly slightly after to deal with the rest of the agenda. So yes. Sorry, the short answer was yes. Lynette, welcome to the table. Thank you.
Kia ora. How are you this morning? Sorry, I think the staff are still coming in. They've been keeping the seats free. So someone may join me in a minute, hopefully. This morning we're talking about the organics plant and the processing plant and the options in the report in front of you. I don't have a presentation, but I thought I would give you a brief update. Oh, here it is. You know Ross, of course. I'll give you a brief introduction, and then we'll run for questions. So this report is coming to you today in response to two resolutions. One is one that requested a detailed assessment of both of technology, delivery, location options, risks, costs and impacts, including our greenhouse gas emission impacts. And the second resolution was in relation to the petition that was tabled last month. Also, what's happened recently is that the government has released the Transforming Recycling document, and we are also expecting the imminent release of their emissions reduction plan. So that has changed the landscape that we're working within around organics processing in particular. The current operation, Ross will give you an update before we go to questions, a very brief update on where we're at with it, but I do want to highlight with the table that we have not had a determination on the abatement notice from ECAN at this point in time. We have undertaken an independent report has been undertaken by Jacobs, and that work also included a request for information to gather market information. So it was literally a market request for information. Now, the technical assessment has shown that there's a number of technology options that could be used. But it's also shown that there is going to be more demand or an increased demand for organic waste to be diverted from landfill. So as we've indicated, it is changing the face of the market as we've got it now, and it will create additional demand for processing options. There's a variety, as I've said, there's a variety of options, and that depends on the type of feedstock we've got as to what is the right option to use. Aerated static piles are great and they work well, but anaerobic digestion might be better, particularly if we're dealing with food waste because it's fully enclosed. So there's all sorts of those options. The report also looked at locations, and a number of locations. What the report did tell us and was able to tell us was the quantum of land that we're likely to need should we move this site. And it's definitely well in excess of 5 hectares. But what it really did tell us is that we need to consider the combination of site, technology, and the feedstock that we've got coming in to find the right option, and it's a combination of those. And we could be looking at multiple options. So the report also talked through risks and consenting. It did say that there's no insurmountable barrier to consenting. But what I do need to be clear is that consenting is going to be significant, and we're going to have to work hard with the regulator to achieve our consenting goals. So it's going to be time consuming. There's also, what the report highlights is there's a balance when you try and understand the emissions impacts that we have. The balance between transporting and outputs. So there's a balance in what we look at. And so all of these need to be considered in the whole to find a solution. And we're also looking to ensure that when we assess costs, we assess whole of life costs, so we find the best outcome for the community on a cost basis and an output basis. And all of the work that we're doing is working to make sure that what we do aligns with the policies and strategies that you have, particularly our waste minimisation and management plan, climate resilience strategy, and our targets around emission reduction. They are the big ones that we're working to achieve. I'm going to get Ross to give you an update on what's been happening down at the plant and what we've done in the last 12, 18 months since to work on this. And then we'll just talk quickly about next steps, and then that'll be us.
Yep, and then we'll move to questions. Yep. Ross, thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Thank you. Staff, we've worked with the contractor Living Earth and developed and implemented a transitional plan for maintaining the operation of the organics processing plant. It was developed in June 2021 and just outlines the interim measures to reduce potential sources of odour, which included stop receiving pre-consumer food organics, minimising on-site storage of finished compost by prioritising screening and removal of finished product from the site, maintain the effective treatment of processing air, including maintenance of the biofilter, and to investigate the buffering, including boundary plantings along the southern side of the boundary, and to maximise the stability of the compost on site. So since the implementation of the plan, the key changes that have happened is that all of the maturing compost has been removed. This is the compost that was previously stored in windrows. There was 31,000 tonnes removed from site. Completed the work on the biofilter to improve the back pressure and sustain airflows in order to maintain effective treatment for processing of the air. A new roof cover was installed on the screening shed, and that air from there is also passed through a biofilter. Included the addition of probiotics to the compost. What that does is accelerate the composting process. So when it comes out, it's a lot mature and less odorous. We've also had an independent air quality experts, it's PDP, carry out site assessment, and they have concluded that the number of potential odour sources from the site have been eliminated, therefore reducing the likelihood of offensive injectional odour beyond the boundary. And that PDP report is an attachment to this report. Thank you.
So we are continuing with the independent monitoring, and ECAN are continuing with their monitoring as well. So that is ongoing. So next steps in with this report, as we've highlighted and has been highlighted, we're asking for an in-principle agreement to move the site. Please be aware that that's not us saying we're going to pick up what we've got and shift it somewhere else. What we want to do is find the best option moving forward to achieve longevity and ensure we meet our goals that we've got. So it could be something that looks quite different. But the request is to move into a detailed procurement process. Now, this is very complex, and that's partly highlighted by what we've just said. There's multiple inputs and output to get the outputs that we want. So it's likely to be multiple staged process, and it will definitely involve bringing a detailed procurement plan back to this committee. We will need to work through that and fully evaluate all the options and the implications of those options. So as highlighted earlier in the deputations, we are able to come back to you with full information and to ensure that you have a very informed report to make a decision on. And please be assured we are going to work as fast as we can. We are aiming for the 3 years if we can at all do it, but we are trying to be honest with you up front now that it is a difficult process that we're working through. So we are going to hit February for a decision, all things being equal, but that is very difficult. So we are working to hit that date to have a decision report back to council so that you can have a decision on what the next steps are, and then something has to be built or agreed on.
Thank you.
That's
so
me.
you're happy to move to questions now?
So I am.
Pauline.
Thank you. Just considering those upgrades that's already happened at the existing plant, and there seems to be quite a lot of concern in the with the community on particularly the biofilter, which you say has been upgraded. Have they been invited to have a bit of a tour and have a look at those changes?
Yeah, look, there is always an invite. Living Earth has been accommodating if people do want to, and there was, as part of this program of work, inviting community to, if they wanted to go and visit Living Earth. I think that one of the arranged visits was put off due to COVID, but it was
Might be good to reactivate that. I'm thinking of particularly the liaison group and the affected community that comes in here. And secondly, the report states that if we were to close the plant and take the green waste to Cape Valley, it would be a cost of $8 million a year. I'm just wondering if that is the net cost and a full cost, and because you'll have overs and unders,
Yeah.
wins and losers, and you'll have other things like possibly the waste minimisation levy loss or not. You may have contractor obligations for compensation. I don't know. Do you have any idea of a net cost per annum?
You did right with those considerations, and the cost that we've put on there is really the transport and the disposal cost of that organic waste going to Cape Valley. So no, we haven't gone through that process and worked out a net
Right.
cost. That is really just the cost of
Shifting to disposal.
So
And
could
we
I
would
like
have
to
to come
signal
back
an
and report on
additional recommendation there that we seek that information. Would it be possible to get information within a month?
Yeah.
So, Pauline,
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah, I
essentially,
think so.
if we put it into the context of today's meeting, what we're essentially saying, if I understand it correctly, is we heard some deputations this morning. One of the things that was requested from those making the deputations was that we close the plant immediately. What we're saying is that the information that's provided in this report is not sufficient for us to make such a decision today, but there is further information that could be provided so that we can consider whether closing the plant straight away
As an option.
is achievable and what the costs would be, and there'll be contractual obligations and there'll be costs and there'll be implications. So what Pauline, I think you're asking for is the report that we're talking about there, isn't it?
Yes, and I'm just asking if that could be
Yes,
come back within a month.
Yes, we could get
And
that
also
back to next
considering, as the Mayor has outlined in her last comments, that we have a statutory obligation to know what those costs are. And you'll note that I'm asking for the net cost, so the overs and the unders and what we end up having to pay to close that plant.
Yep. So request staff bring back in 1 month the full cost to council,
The full net cost, I think, would be better.
full net cost to council, and I'd be tempted to add the words "and implications" in there. Because some of it might be legal, some of it might be contractual, some of it might be practical. There's more to consider here than just cost.
Yep, I'm happy with that.
Environmental and, weighing, we've heard from the community this morning, giving weight to what we've heard from the community in that equation as well, as we should.
Thank you.
Net cost and implications, net cost to council and implications of closing the plant. Do you want to add the words immediately? Immediately closing the plant?
Yes.
Yeah, of immediately closing the plant.
Just, do you want to have a little bit of flexibility about that? I mean, obviously there are contractual obligations.
That's
what I'm meaning by implications.
staff are aware of what we're asking. Yep. That's why I'm saying the full net cost.
Yep.
Thank
All
you.
right. So, Pauline, I'm assuming that you're going to be happy to move all of this with that added?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Great. Coming back to questions, Tim.
Thank you. And Pauline asked my first one, but following and adding to Pauline's, could we also ask the organisation options to absorb that cost within the budgets that we've set in our long-term and annual plans? I think that's important. It goes back to what Leanne was saying before.
To me, that's part of the implications. We can
Yeah.
we can
Budgetary
add that as one of the
implications
implications.
Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
at the moment we've got a minimum of 8 million we're going to add to our budgets. We've got to look at how we can absorb that somewhere in the organisation. So if we can look at that and have that feedback. The second one, with regards to things that are organics that are accepted by the plant, is there any type of organics that increases the odour that we could look at removing? I think Bruce King mentioned there's bourons, there's other. So if there is commercial foodstuffs that are dumped or delivered to the organics, can we start looking at refusing some of those items that leave more of an odour than others in the short term?
Yeah, absolutely, and that was raised as one of the considerations is the interim plan. We did stop receiving commercial pre-consumer waste in December, so we don't receive that material anymore. If in terms of the organic or the food scrap component of the green waste, that makes up, of the organic collection rather, that makes up about 23% of the total. So it was presented at a community liaison group, the potential, and there was a report going back to the community of the impacts of removing that food scraps from the organic waste, and the impacts overall, we wouldn't have thought there'd be a reduction in odour. What we get back from the operator is that the main cause of the odour is the grass content in the organics. That has the highest potential to go anaerobic.
In the season we've just had has been a really high growth season, so we've had a very large volume through, consistent and large volume through this season. It's been quite...
Is there any opportunity to, when people are taking their organic waste to the recycling with regards to green waste, is there an opportunity there to separate grass, or just when we do a lot of communications, and so...
Yeah, only the green waste drop-off at the Metro transfer station actually goes through that organics processing plant. From the other two transfer stations, that is a separate contract and goes elsewhere. I imagine that would be difficult to separate. It's not something that's been looked at.
Okay, so there must be commercial operators that dump or that bring their grass because lawn mowing, etc. So, if that is indeed the source.
Yeah, what was happening previous is that that material was being windrowed at the organics processing plant site, so that was outside. It didn't actually go into the processing tunnels at all. That part of the operation has now ceased. That's part of the interim as well. We wanted to try and achieve to remove all possible odour sources, and that was one that was identified, so that has been removed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you. I just want to get a clarification from staff, because Resolution 6 changed slightly from when you said you could do it in a month, from including the implications of doing it. So is that still a practical timeframe to get that completed by?
Yeah, we can come back next month in the report to add to this committee. Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Yanni.
Thank you. I appreciate today that we've heard a lot about the impact of odour, but we also know that there is a significant impact of dust. Can you advise, under the current consent, how many dust deposition exceedances the plant has had?
There are deposition gauges which are positioned around the site internally and externally. There has been an increase. I do have the report here. I can go through and look at the exact numbers. There has been an increase over the last period due to the removal of the 31,000 tonnes of material. That's because that's more than the activity would usually be. Since that material has been removed from site, there has been no exceedance of those gauges, of the deposition gauges. So what we've seen is, as all that activity has happened and that material removed, we have seen an increase, but now that material is gone, we're not seeing any exceedances.
So just to be really clear, in terms of the current resource consent, is the plant compliant with its consent conditions around dust?
We have had no issues raised with us from ECAN around dust
Even though the independent
with
report
regard to our consent.
showed that the dust deposition limit was exceeded on 11 of the 12 months in the 2020-21 reporting period. 11 out of the 12 months, the dust deposition limit was exceeded, and ECAN have no problem with it.
Which monitor was that particular? Was it?
That's from the PDP report.
Yeah, there's a number of gauges, some of them are internal monitoring.
It's under the heading 7, Compliance with Consent Conditions 2020-2021, the dust monitoring program undertaken by Living Earth in 2020-21.
So if
And it just says dust control measures shall be implemented to maintain the rate of dust deposition at the consent holder's boundary measured in accordance with condition 33A. And then it goes on to say the dust deposition limit was exceeded on 11 of the 12 months with available measurements in the 2020-21 reporting period. It then goes on to say, however, 19 of the 31 exceedances were recorded at on-site monitoring locations, and that the dust deposition limit was exceeded off-site from August 2020 to June 2021. So
we've had nothing from Environment Canterbury regarding exceeding those dust levels in terms of the consent.
So they're not in breach of the consent, even if they're in breach of the limits.
all we can answer is the answer we've just
Yeah.
given you is that we have had no feedback from ECAN in relation to dust, in relation to the consent requirements.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Can I just check, in terms of, you said that we've had no determination on the abatement notice from ECAN.
No,
I'm just trying to understand just the timing. Is that the abatement notice that was given after the adaptive management plan timeframe was up? So after we were supposed to be fully compliant, is this around the notice of non-compliance that we received after that time, or is it around the whole?
abatement notice? We have
Right.
had no feedback from ECAN in relation to the abatement notice and what, if any, action they are taking.
So have they given
We've
us
had
any time
nothing.
frame for a response, or do we know what the kind of benchmark time frame is to get a response?
So all we can do today is say to you, we have had no information and feedback from ECAN on when they are going to do this or when they are going to give us any feedback on the abatement notice. We have had one non-conformance, and we've been backwards and forwards with them on that, and there are disagreements between the two organisations on that, but we have had no feedback on the abatement notice that was due to be completed by the 31st of January.
For this year? Yeah,
We've
correct.
had no feedback since the 31st of January on the abatement notice.
Can I just check in regards to just putting an additional resolution that, and I know in the report you do mention around what central government are doing, but just picking up on the comments from the local MP, could we just have like a 0.7, perhaps a noting provision that just notes that council is keen to work with the local MPs to collaborate with central government as much as possible to achieve the best possible outcome for the community, or something like that. But I just think it's important to capture the desire and the offer that we should be trying to work together with central government over the shared goals around recycling, and also the opportunities to get progress quicker rather than later.
So let's.
I'm open to a different wording. I just wanted to raise that. I don't know if staff have some suggestions or whether we just need to make a note.
Is there any comment from staff on that?
No, that's what we're doing, and we've talked regularly and often about the fact that we're working closely with the Ministry for Environment, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's working with local MPs at one level, but it's working with
We've
governments.
got to work with the Ministry of Environment, unless they're the ones that are undertaking the work, and they're the ones that are going to be critical in us being able to move forward successfully. And that was pointed out in the deputation this morning by Dr. McClellan.
So if we were noting anything, it would be that council is working with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the council will work with central government
Well, is working with central
we
government.
are already.
and will continue to.
Yeah. So if it's something that's happening, there's no harm in noting it. Although we've been told that it's happening, and we can assume that it will continue to happen. Expect that it will continue to happen, regardless.
We can note it in the report that comes back.
So note that council is working with central government. On shared, what would we say? Shared goals, shared outcomes regarding recycling.
Outcomes.
Yeah. Okay, so note that council is working with central government on shared outcomes regarding recycling. No, just with central government on shared outcomes regarding recycling. Well, we could, yeah, okay, so central government and local MPs then, we can leave that in there. Regarding recycling. Yep. All right, thank you. Okay, still with questions, Melanie.
Now, with the Jacobs report, and I'm sort of looking at resolution 3 there, it does say that there's a number of things that could be improved to reduce odour, and one of those is about the tailings, which was mentioned in the deputations. So, do we want... One example it says in this report is about reducing the size of those piles, which is referred to. So if we're supporting the current process controls, does that include actually trying to do more to mitigate?
Yeah,
because it doesn't read like that.
So one of the mitigations is to remove as much of those tailings as we can. And so as I pointed out before to Councillor Scandra, it's been an unprecedented season for growth, and we have struggled to remove the tailings, but they are working on it. Ross?
Yeah, look, perhaps I'll just explain a little bit about the process. When the compost is screened, the tailings are the large fractions that are left over. They are useful and are used in the next stage of the process as the porosity helps with the next batch of compost, if you like. So because there has been a very long season, a lot of grass content, there's a lot more tailings out of the new screening, because remembering now that the compost is coming straight out of tunnels, being screened, and that finished compost is off the next day. So that's a whole change in the process. So those tailings are now going to, we've had a reduction of 1,000 tonne over the last month. So that pile will come down in that process now that we're into this quieter time, if you like. So there's less input coming through from curbside. And those tailings we need those reduced, because that is a potential source of odour.
So we agree, and that's what we're working to achieve. Yep.
All right. Anything further? Okay, so Pauline, you're happy to move this. Do I have a seconder? Yanni will second. So moved by Pauline, seconded by Yanni. Let's now move into any debate. Is there any debate? Pauline.
Yeah, look, thank you. This has been a really good report today, and thanks staff for everything that they're doing to try and mitigate the issue as it stands. But when this options report came to my committee, I think December 2020, we resolved to upgrade the plant because that was actually an upgrade. It's not just a repair, it's an upgrade. That was going to totally enclose the operation, and it would then become a negative pressure system, which we've heard today is what people really want. And how we know what happened after that the cost blew out, and therefore we came with another report figuring out, well, look, if we're going to spend that much money, we might have to look at another site and moving it. So that's a kind of brief history of why we made that decision when we did. And also at the time I knew that finding another site was not easy. It's a very, very long-term process, as we learnt through trying to find the site for Cape Valley. It was a heck of an exercise. It's a lot of NIMBYism in it. So that's what we're looking at now, a bit of an exercise to find another site, if we agree in principle today, which I'm sure we will. But what we're faced with now is that this community's got a double whammy with the wastewater treatment plant. And even though, as staff are telling us, and some of the deputations have told us that the odour is being mitigated and it is reducing, but it's not reducing enough, and it's also being totally clouded by this wastewater treatment plant issue. And what we're hearing today is actually enough is enough, and I know it's been enough for a long time, but with this double whammy, it's just too much. And I think that the community has lost trust in us, and I would really like to regain that trust back. They've been robbed of their quality of life for so long, and this double impact is just too much. It's costing the community financially, as we've heard today, which Ian Galloway has expressed concern about, emotionally, mentally, and also their dignity of living in a place with these adverse conditions. And that is why I've put the extra number 6 in there, to really have a look at closing the thing in the meantime. So if that's at all possible, I don't see any other way around this. Once we get that report back, I'll really look at that really seriously, because it's just enough is enough. So I'll be supporting this today, and I encourage the rest of the councillors to as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? Yanni.
Thank you. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it is a quite frequently used saying, and from writer philosopher George Santayana. We cannot change the past, but we can change the future. As the only current city councillor who was here in 2007, I abstained from the original decision on the development of the site and am deeply disappointed over what has occurred. Looking at the information, here is what I've learned from that time. There was a clear lack of odour modelling. It was wrong to locate it in a prevailing wind towards a residential area. There was confusion over what was being built and who was responsible if it didn't work. There was a complete lack of oversight by the regulatory agency ECAN, and there were poor consent conditions that were insufficient to safeguard the local community from harm. It should have been fully enclosed when it was built, if it was going to be built at that site. But I don't believe it should have been. It should have been put into the country, as was the second option. I've also learned that there's been significant profits have been made by the operator, despite the fact that there have been thousands of complaints and numerous non-compliances. In December 2020, I personally believe we should have made the decision to move the plant, as it was obvious that a sustainable long-term solution was not to have a facility so close to where people live, work and play, located on the coast. I have had complaints from so many areas, such as South New Brighton, Woolston, Linwood, Phillipstown, Sydney. This is not just about Bromley. This is about doing what is right for the city. Today we have an opportunity to give hope to communities across Eastern Christchurch that we have learnt our lessons from this embarrassing episode of our history. We can make a decision today that looks forward to a better, more suitable location for the organics treatment plant than its current place.
I will do everything in my power as local councillor to get a new site sorted and fast track to operation. I will continue my advocacy for the local community and work as hard as I can to ensure that their voices are taken seriously in both the continued operation of the existing plant and in the development of a new site. We must work collaboratively with central government to ensure we get the synergy with their proposed recycling aims and get as much support as possible to get a new site consented, funded and operational. In conclusion, I want to thank the local community who have stood up and made their voices known for many years. I want to apologise to them for what they've been through. It has clearly been totally unacceptable. But I want the community to also rest assured that just because we are making a decision today in principle to relocate the plant, it does not excuse or exempt the council or the operator from compliance with its current resource consent. It is and will continue to be completely unacceptable for offensive and objectionable odours beyond the boundary and for dust to exceed its permitted levels. The reality is that it needs to be moved, and it needs to be moved as fast as we can. We have an opportunity to acknowledge that we got it wrong, to apologise, and to start taking steps to make it right. Thank you.
So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. So that brings us to just beyond 1:15. So we'll still adjourn for an hour for lunch. So we'll come back at 2:15, and that'll be for venues Otatahi and the other draft statements of intent. So we'll adjourn until 2:15. Thank you.